All right, hello, welcome everyone to DC on RMD. This is the Titans edition, the first show in a couple of years for the Titans edition.
It is.
And David, coincidentally, the final,
The final, yes.
the final show or episode of our Titans edition. Sad to say, and I say that little bit of with a question mark because I'm not sure if I would want more Titans based on
The last season.
dip in quality.
Yeah, it made Steve disappear into the multiverse like Gar.
Yeah, I had mentioned to you guys that I would like to put together a final wrap up of Titans because there has been a lot of DC shows that we have just abruptly quit covering because of quality issues. We're at the point now in podcasting where it's like, well, listen, if we're not enjoying ourselves, then why are we doing this?
Why are we punishing ourselves?
So we just stopped a lot of things, but Titans, I didn't feel was one of those shows at the time when we chose not to cover it. There were other things that were going on, but as it works out, Dave, or I should say it kind of works out because no one liked the final season. Steve called me and said, dude, do you really want to do a final discussion? I can't even get through this. So I called you and said, David, you're old reliable.
Because
Will you be willing?
myself. I forced myself through this because I had to, dude, because like Titans was really good. I mean, the first 3 seasons were some of my favorite comic book shows that I've seen in a very long time, up there with Doom Patrol and Moon Knight and a lot of comic book shows that came out. Titans came out, and especially on the strength of season 3, where I believe that was some of the best storytelling we've ever seen in a comic book TV show.
Yeah.
So I was hyped to see what they would do going to Metropolis. And all of a sudden now we're going to get season 3. I looked at season 3 and I said, okay, we got Batman. We got a Batman centralized Titan story that's centered around Grayson, and it's centered around Todd, and it's centered around the Batman characters. By the end of that, it was alluded that, oh, we're going to go to Metropolis now. So we're going to focus on Connor.
Yeah.
And I was like, okay, an entire season of Titans to revolve around a Superman story, because that's what I thought it would be like.
Yes, and then they cast the actor to play Lex Luthor. His name eludes me currently, who I absolutely love.
Titus
Welliver play Lex Luthor, who I absolutely love. Titus Welliver, he's a fantastic actor. So when it was announced that he was going to be playing Lex, I got really excited. And then they announced that Joseph Morgan from Vampire Diaries and the originals was going to play Sebastian Sanger. I was like, okay, this season is going to be really good. And unfortunately, it wasn't just the worst season of Titans to date, but it was probably one of the worst series or seasons of DC live action shows.
Oh, easily.
I can't say it's the absolute worst, but it actually is one of the worst seasons. It's right up there with the final few seasons of The Flash and the final few seasons of Arrow. It's that poor in quality. That's how far it dropped. That's my biggest problem with this, David, because you had the first 2 seasons, which, in my opinion, were comparable to HBO programming.
Yes.
High quality acting, high quality scripting. There were some issues with the scripting, but overall it worked. Directing was top notch. The overall production quality was out of this world for a DC show, especially because we were, at that time, we were more acclimated to the stuff that was being produced for the CW. So when they decided to launch Doom Patrol, Titans, Swamp Thing, and Stargirl on the DC Universe app or streaming service, it was like a gift from the gods.
Yeah.
Like, holy crap, this is what we've been wanting. High quality DC live action mature shows.
And we got it.
And we got it for 2.5 years. The dip in quality started to happen in the latter half of the 3rd season.
Yeah.
And it came to complete fruition in the 4th season in the manifestation of a complete mess incoherent series that didn't have a specific direction, wishy-washy in characterization and motivation. There was no defining spirit about the series, or I should say aesthetic, or theme. Was there even a fucking theme?
You thought there would be, especially with the first 2 to 3 episodes. I thought that the theme was going to be about like
It's paternal, maybe?
paternal, Connor dealing with the relationship of being Luther and Superman's clone, and having to deal with that identity crisis, trying to deal with, especially
trying to find out who your identity,
what your identity was.
What is your identity, and does your genetic relation, like say to a biological father, does that constitute identity? Does that mean you will have a similar identity? How do you make sense of your own identity? Is it something that you actually cultivate yourself, or is it handed down? Is it hereditary? That seemed like what they were trying to do with those opening episodes, with the inclusion of Lex Luthor, with the inclusion of even Superman using his name, never really showing him, but his presence was there. And then you had Trigon with Brother Blood and Rachel Roth. You're like, okay, I see what they're doing, but it never came to complete fruition.
Yeah, especially when you're dealing with the narrative. I thought with the first 3 episodes, the parallel was going to be Sanger and Connor, because you have Sanger, who's dealing with the idea of being told that his destiny is Brother Blood,
right?
And it's
stipulated based on his father,
exactly. And then you do that with the parallel with Connor, with your biological clone of Lex Luthor and Superman, and obviously because of what happens to Lex, you have to live in Lex's shadow now. Okay.
But you're also playing with the idea of identity.
Yeah.
In crisis, because you have Connor who's like, okay, well, I have a good side. I know I do. I'm also genetically connected to the greatest superhero in history. But I'm also genetically connected to one of the worst villains in history. You have Brother Blood, who is literally at conflict with becoming evil or maintaining the status quo of his own pathetic life.
Yeah.
That's a beautiful parallel there.
And then when
it went nowhere.
And when you throw it with the whole idea that Sanger isn't totally a bad person, because he wants to help. He wants to help a person like Corey. He wants to, listen to the Titans in the very beginning.
Yeah.
He actually goes out to help them at some point. So that shows that basically he has this proclivity of actually being a good person. Yeah, he's supposedly destined by this cult to become Brother Blood and be this villain. But does he have to be? Because it's obvious a part of him not really sure he wants that.
Yeah.
But and that's why it's so frustrating that after you get past the 3 episodes, it's just like what you said. It becomes a cluster of ideas that basically they say, oh, we got to throw in Gar and his connection to the Red. We got to throw in Corey and the Tamarinians. And we got to all bring that all together. Oh, we got to bring in Doom Patrol also in the middle of this for some strange reason.
They were trying to do too many things at once. And partly that has, or I should say potentially, that could have to do with the fact that the show was being canceled, with James Gunn going on a canceling spree or a killing spree of just shutting down everything that he doesn't want to be a part of his world. So you had the showrunners trying to bring a fair amount of closure to all of our character arcs. And I will say, if I had to pinpoint one pro in the season, let's forget all of the background noise that conflicts with some of the closure. I will say that the way they brought closure to all of our characters was satisfying. The closure itself, when they finally got to it, but how we got to it was messy.
Oh my God,
and extremely incoherent. But seeing Dick Grayson and Corey come together at the end which we kind of always knew they would probably end up together.
Yeah.
And then you had Rachel shunning the evil, the dark side of her identity and becoming more pure in spirit. You had Gar becoming one with the red, which I will say, even though it came out of nowhere, I will say the episode that featured Gar and his journey through the multiverse and the connectiveness of the red was probably the best episode of the entire season.
Oh, it was the most fun season. It was the most fun episode because we had so many things that were showing the possibilities of what the red can possibly do. I mean, in other shows, me and you have talked about the mythos in DC when it comes to the darker side of DC. There's also the idea in that area that the DC universe itself is built between this war between the red, the green, the black,
or the rot,
and the rot.
Yeah.
And like that whole concept in the DC universe is such a awesome storytelling device. And for them to bring it in and use Gar to kind of be the crux of that, it was really interesting. And seeing the aspects of like what they feel the red can do.
Yeah. I almost feel like they were setting up another backdoor pilot.
Yeah.
Didn't it? Because it didn't feel it didn't feel simply like closure. It felt like they were opening a door to another TV series, as if this was planned long before they were told that everything they're doing is going to be canceled, because it was so well crafted. That's why I say it's the best episode, because it's close-ended.
Yeah.
It relies on nothing but Gar, and it sets up stuff and then knocks it out the park before the episode ends. And that's why I feel like ultimately that's probably the best episode of the season, because of how it's disconnected from the rest of the season, and that's why it's better than the rest of the episodes.
Because I honestly feel that whole thing with Gar, I guarantee you, if they were given the chance to continue Titans after this season, if they did, I agree with you, number one, with your point that I think the team was destroyed because they all panicked once James Gunn started canceling stuff. Because in the they probably had long-term ideas for the entire season where we'll focus on this character's mythos, we'll focus on this character's mythos. Next season would have probably focused more on Gar and the red and that battle between the green, the red, and the rot. I just have this particular feeling that basically that was going to be the following season. Unfortunately, they were like going, oh man, we have this great idea and we're going to introduce it in this season. We got to wrap it up. We don't want this to get destroyed by anybody else. So let's wrap up the whole thing with red really fast. And by doing so, it creates like what you said, this nice contained story. But it makes the entire rest of the season seem irrelevant to that.
Yeah.
And it makes it messy.
Yeah. And also on top of that, even though the Gar episode was the strongest episode when it comes to writing and intent, at the same time, with the following episode that was connected in some degree to the Gar-centric episode, you reintroduced the Doom Patrol.
Yeah.
Which I did like to see them. It was nice. But if viewers remember, they were no longer in the same universe.
Yes. They were taken somewhere else. And
Gar. Now, if this was the exact. Now, you could say, well, it was a different Doom Patrol. It was the Doom Patrol from this universe now, but it wasn't. It was the exact same crew. Forget the actors. We know the actors were different, but these characters and the actors that are playing them were the exact same Doom Patrol characters from the backdoor pilot, which was effectively disconnected because of the Flashes and the Arrows Crisis on Infinite Earths crossover event, where they literally state that Doom Patrol's universe is now separate from Titans.
Yeah.
And yet this episode completely disregards that, thereby validating, David, what I've said since day one about the CW bullshit Crisis on Infinite Earths. It's meaningless. No one signed off on it. No writers are like, yep, I'm going by that. It's just something they decided to do,
And
which
especially,
speaks, David, to the greater problem of DC, that they have no ground, no solid ground. There are no definitive rules ever. And that's the reason why their shows that start off great, like Titans, ends up becoming a sloppy mess of incoherent shit.
yeah. And like, especially since if you are asking your audience and basically telling the audience, hey, we're bringing in Doom Patrol, the guys from that other show that obviously our audience loves. If you're doing that and trying to say that they're separate, then why are you bringing in elements of that story into Titans then by bringing in like, hey, Dr. Niles Calder? Yeah, he created this mess in search of his goal of immortality.
Mm-hmm.
The only reason why that ever gets, put out there is because if you go to the show Doom Patrol, that's Miles Calder's
Correct.
storyline.
Yeah.
No one in Titans knows about that.
No. And David, what makes it even more frustrating is the prior episode that led into him being trapped with his former crew, Gar being trapped with his former Doom Patrol crew, was an episode that dealt with the multiverse. So if they wanted to bring closure to Gar's storyline in a way that would make sense, they would connect the multiverse idea with the Doom Patrol crew. And that's how he meets them, because he crosses back over.
Yeah.
And then it brings ultimate closure to how he started in this series. But no. Now we're going to bypass the multiverse. We're now done with it. And now he's going to meet the Doom Patrol crew back in his universe, which makes no sense based on the established canon.
No sense whatsoever. And then it just messes up your story, because by the end of it, I agree with you. I thought that entire segment with Gar was fun. It was fun. Those 2 episodes with him and the Doom Patrol were fun. But at the end of the day, it just is like we go back, and then you force Gar back into the main story, and you're like going, you feel like, well, what was the point of the Doom Patrol story in concert to this if you're not going to bring Doom Patrol to help? That's the bigger thing too. I was like going, okay.
It was just there as a sign off. It was a salute. It was like, see you later,
That's
everyone.
what I felt. I was like going, this was just simply so that they can just say adios. This is the end of that storyline, and we'll never see it again.
Yeah.
Well, thanks a lot for making that feel insubstantial to the entire season then, because you gave two fairly entertaining stories, but just belittled them in the very end.
And also that episode that featured Doom Patrol was completely useless.
Mm-hmm.
It was a waste of time. It really did nothing. I understand what they were trying to do. That this idea that Gar wasn't ready to leave yet, that he put himself in this place. Why he put the Doom Patrol there as well, I'm not sure. Was that even clear?
Well, why did they even have to bring Corey over to the Doom Patrol?
Why did they bring Corey? None of it made sense.
I mean, the jokes were there, and it's funny. But like,
I will say, anytime you can get more Corey is a time well spent.
It's a time well spent,
because she is my secret goddess.
And I'm sorry, if Starfire can be in Doom Patrol, that would be that just opens the fun door up to anything that could be hilarious.
I think a lot of these problems just goes right back to the fact that there's so many people at Camp Warner Brothers and DC that really have no accountability to story. There's no accountability. It's like, well, you want to do this and you want to create a crossover that says that everything's connected. Okay, but the next people, we're just going to ignore that, and that crossover means nothing, and nothing is connected, and the story doesn't matter, so just do whatever you want. And David, guess what? I would be okay with that if at least the writing didn't suffer. If the writing for Titan Season 4 was so tight and then they broke canon because in the grand scheme of things, no one gives a fuck what the CW did over there, then fine. But the fact that they do rely on that to some degree, but then disregard it when they want to, and then the entire narrative suffers from that incoherence and lack of thought and foresight in writing, then I have problems.
Yeah.
And David, at the end of the day, what really destroyed this series is what destroyed Swamp Thing. Is the fact that DC and Warner Brothers don't really have a definitive idea or strategy behind anything. Because the reason why the first 2 seasons of Titan were so strong, and I'm going to harken back to an old beef I've had with Warner Brothers. They destroyed themselves when they closed down the DC Universe streaming service. Because for the first time, David, in the history of DC IP, they had a specific home for DC content. And not just DC content like, say, the CW, how they became a stable for DC content. You had a home for high-quality DC content, something that we were not accustomed to when it came to live-action TV shows. And they just shut it down because they decided they wanted to make a new streaming service called HBO Max. And they were going to dissolve and destroy everything they did. And then when they brought that content over, a lot of us were saying, okay, well, they're shuttering the streaming service down, the DC Universe streaming service, but at least they're going to continue these stories on HBO Max. But the difference is this, David. On the DCU streaming service, it was more than just content. It was what they relied on to make revenue. It was their heart. They cared about it. The people were producing and curating really good stories. When it went to HBO Max, it just became one product amongst hundreds, and it just became content. And when you have something that's just content, you don't care about the nuances. You're simply trying to stock those shelves with product that people can sort through and purchase. That's what happened to all of the shows, and that's why you saw such a drastic dip in quality from season 1 to season 4.
And here's the funny part. I would agree with you 100% on this is all on WB's plate. This is the problem with WB. However, the one thing I would add to that, it's not just WB's fault, but it's also this show running and this production team's fault for Titans, because they're not blameless on this, because you have another show out there in the DC landscape that faced the same issues that they had, but they were able to pull off a very concise and great story in Superman and Lois. The difference between the two shows and the two production teams, I feel, was one team, Superman and Lois, was willing to stick to their guns and say, no, we're going to stick to our narrative. Our whole goal is to focus on that narrative. That's it. On the other side, it was a bunch of people panicking, saying, I'm never going to get my story out. I got to get my story out. I got to get this out. I got to get this out. Oh, I got to bring in this character and this character and this character. Superman and Lois, because they had such a strong writing room and a strong showrunner to actually have a backbone and actually say, no, we're going to stick to our plan. And here's the game plan we had for our season. Yeah, WB basically said, we're not sure if we're going to get another season. Oh, well, we're going to get to the end of this season, the plan. And, we're going to allow our work to push the narrative that, hey, fans will drive the demand of our show up, because that's how, if you look at the landscape now, so many revivals of shows have been because fans want it back. Well, the WB or Disney or whoever decides this had such a acclaim. Oh, so many people came out and wrote up petitions for this show to come back.
Yeah,
we'll give them another season. There you go. I look at the Titans crew and I'm like going, you guys panicked, you guys flinched, and then this is what happens. Now you have a messy season, and now you have no one. None of the fans are clamoring for Titans season 5. What's going to happen to the Titans? You have nothing like that because you guys flinched.
Yeah, a lot of people just gave up
They gave up.
watching season 4. Some people had problems with season 3. I'm one of them. I know you didn't. I know you and Steve you guys were really on board with season 3. I felt season 3 was okay, but you started to see the cracks.
Yeah.
For example, their biggest mistake with season 3, in my opinion, was the portrayal of Scarecrow. I don't know Scarecrow that acts like the Joker. I mean, to me, he was an anarchist. I mean, is that really Scarecrow? Like, I don't remember Scarecrow being his character is really made up. And correct me if I'm wrong. You're more of a Batman guy than I am, but Scarecrow or Crane, correct?
Yeah.
Ichabod, is that his name?
Yeah, Dr. Crane.
Am I getting that right? Yeah, I am, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. He's more of a character that's used for philosophical nuance oftentimes.
Psychological nuance too.
Yes.
Yeah.
Philosophical and psychological nuance.
Oh no, absolutely.
The Joker, you can argue there are moments and storylines that absolutely use him for the same, but just the way they are portrayed, and this is a problem I feel is also something that's plaguing DC content, specifically DC villains. Seems like a lot of our villains are just simply another variation of the Joker.
And that's the thing.
They
It's kinda
all are
like-
maniacal. They laugh. They're crazed. And I know a lot of Batman villains are crazed. And I mean, it says something about Arkham Asylum. In fact, I believe you and I and possibly Paul discussed the fact that that's a problem in itself.
itself, yeah.
It says something about society and how we treat the mentally ill.
Mm-hmm.
So that's obviously a tried and true method when it comes to the shaping of Batman villains. But when it comes to the actual portrayal, not what drives them, but the portrayal, the way the actor played Crane was just another variation of the Joker. It wasn't Scarecrow.
Yeah, it wasn't Scarecrow, and I agree with. I mean, I remember us discussing about season 3 toward the end that there are some legitimate gripes for like character portrayals, and the thing with Crane.
I hate. I know this is gonna be really mean. I hate the new guy, the new Robin.
Oh, you mean Tim, the guy who plays Tim Drake?
He's hard to watch, man.
He is.
He is so podunk in the 3rd season.
If you compare him to Jason, the kid who plays Jason.
And maybe that's the point, because Tim Drake, by the end of the 4th season, you realize that based on what Grayson says, that 3rd time's a charm. Like, he is going to be the true
Robin,
optimistic, pure hero who is 3 times removed from Bruce Wayne, essentially.
Yes.
And that Bruce Wayne is the disease that creates this darkness inside of both Grayson
and
Jason Todd.
Mm-hmm.
So I do like the metaphor. That is great. But there are moments where I just want to punch the actor out. Like, I don't want to, not the actor, but the way he plays the character.
Yes. Because like the character of Tim Drake, especially, that was one of my gripes in this particular season was I love the character of Tim Drake in the comics.
Yeah.
Because Tim is portrayed as like the ultimate, he is always classified as the best detective out of all the sons of Bruce. He's the one that basically, if any of the sons of Bruce were to become Batman, Tim is the most optimistic or the best choice, because he has the mind to be the world's greatest detective.
Mm-hmm.
And at first, when they introduced Tim Drake, I was hoping they would lean on that, show that Tim is more skilled, just naturally more intelligent and thoughtful than Grayson and Todd. Because each of the sons bring in different things. Jason Todd's supposed to be the I'm going to rush in and shoot first action type of person, the best fighter out of all 3 of the sons of Bruce. Dick Grayson's supposed to be the eldest brother, the one that can teach the younger brothers what to do and uphold the tenets of Bruce Wayne. Tim is supposed to be the smart guy. He's supposed to be, you know, like the not the perfect Batman, but the best Batman to call upon. And here in season 4, he's almost treated like, oh, he's just like this geek. He's this naive, you know.
It just felt stupid because you're in the middle of, in season 3, you're in the middle of Gotham falling apart. It's literally turning into a dystopian future right before our eyes. He's nobody. He has no training. He is a kid. And he's like, I want to be a hero.
I want to be a hero.
I want to stay. What are you going to do? You're just going to get in the way,
Yeah.
bro. You know nothing.
Yeah.
You know absolutely nothing. Congratulations. You investigated. You cucked your way into the stronghold of Bruce's manor is pretty much what he did. He just was a watcher.
Yeah.
And I do like that. But that doesn't equate to being a superhero.
superhero.
You're a guy who watches and figures things out. I like that.
Now, if they went with the narrative, because this is, I think, what the narrative they should have gone with, where it's kind of like Tim believes that what he should do is the right thing. That's it. He doesn't want to just like be glamorous and, you know, want to be the superhero lifestyle.
Yeah.
He wants to do the right thing. That's what they should have focused on.
Yes.
Instead,
Yes.
they made him look like a naive douchebag.
Yeah, David, that's what it came off as. He came off as a douche that had delusions of grandeur.
They made him
Like
come
he
out.
wanted to be a hero so he can call himself a hero more than actually help people.
Not to,
Didn't it seem that way? It felt more about him. It felt like selfish reasons as opposed to helping people,
Yes.
right?
Yeah, and it turned him into what I feel, especially when you get into season 4. And
He was worthless in season 4 until the end. The ending, he finally became relevant.
he became relevant, but like they turned him into, and you know, I hope I don't anger too many people out there, but essentially Greta Thunberg. You know, a person, a kid who basically just wants to yell and say they want to do something
With no experience.
with no experience, none, and not do anything, and expect the adults to do it.
You know why? And you know what that felt like, Dave? That felt like CW.
It feels like
that
CW.
felt like CW writing.
Yeah,
A lot of naivety being masked as superheroism, and it came off as naivety and self-righteousness.
like a perfect example I thought about, because while I was watching this, I was trying to analyze each character, and I was like looking at Tim, and I'm like going, there's something about Tim that is bugging the crap out of me. And I hate it because, as I said, I like the character of Tim Drake.
He's also not a great actor.
And it dawned on me. The motivations of Tim is the same as Batwoman.
Explain.
In the CW show Batwoman, where they where the character basically is, I need to do something. Suddenly I'm great at martial arts and
Yeah.
and I'm a great mechanic and I'm all this and I'm this and I have all these skills just out of the blue.
Isn't that indicative, though, of the times we live in where we have an entire generation, and I am generalizing, so I apologize, but by and large, I am right. We have an entire generation of individuals who don't believe they have to work to achieve anything. They should just be given things. And that's what these characters reflect.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying it's some grand, amazing metaphor for society, because that would be cool. No, it's just the writers themselves. Their own worldviews and ideology is seeping into the development of these types of characters.
And people aren't realizing as writers that is not great character development.
No, not at all.
It is not great character
I
development.
want it just because I want it.
Yeah. And like the only great character development happens. Why? Because a character undergoes a journey. And they earn this.
What's earning? What does that mean? And what does a journey mean?
What does a journey mean? You mean I can't just sit on my butt and just yell at people to do things?
You mean I
No.
can't just constantly ask to be Robin and say I'm going to be the next Robin?
The next Robin.
Dude, when he said that in season 3 and season 4, I wanted to leap into that TV screen.
You wanted to strangle him.
He's the type of guy that you just bully in school, even though I wasn't a bully, but there's so certain guys that you just want to pick on because they looked like they were easy to pick on and they looked annoying. So
Well,
you just wanted to see them cry.
They have
That
Napoleon.
sounds so mean.
They have Napoleon complex.
There you go.
They have a Napoleon complex where it's like, oh, I think that this should happen because I say so. Well, are you going to do anything about it? No, that's your job. No, no, dude, you got to go through this. I mean, like that was the frustrating part for me in season 3 was the fact that you had this really cool narrative, the Batman, the redemption of Bruce Wayne. I was waiting towards the end where it was like, okay, hey, Bruce, you have a third Robin here who wants to be Robin.
Mm-hmm.
And you have Dick telling you about, like, you have to make up for your past sins. Never once did Bruce ever come back. And, like, you have Tim Drake. Yeah, it
Why
falls on.
wouldn't they bring Bruce back?
Why wouldn't they bring Bruce back? He was such a great addition to the cast.
I understand to some degree why they wouldn't. There seemed to be like an effort to separate the codependency between the two, between Dick Grayson and Bruce Wayne. In a lot of ways, that was the major story arc for Dick Grayson from the first season on, to rise above that, to be something else, to not be so codependent on Bruce Wayne and his own darkness, to become your own person, form your own identity. So in that regard, I get why he would be missing from the 4th season, to allow Dick Grayson to stand on his own, which he did. That to me is another pro for the final season. It was nice to see him become an actual legitimate good leader amongst the group, because when it comes to actual story, there wasn't a lot for him to do this season. He was on the outskirts of the narrative many times throughout the entire season.
Oh, yeah.
But he was there as more of a mentor and a leader. He was steering the team. So his story kind of came to an end, honestly, in season 3. And season 4 was just a bit of a denouement or an epilogue of that storyline.
Mm-hmm. But that's also one of the frustrating points, is kind of like what you said, what you mentioned, is it's great what they did with Dick, but like in the end of season 3, you had to leave the door open for Bruce to come back, because remember, Dove is the one that finds Bruce. I think it's Dove and the other character that finds Bruce in the end, and he's just somewhere in like the Scottish Highlands, just
Committing suicide.
Yeah, trying to commit suicide.
Fucking
And like
dark.
I'm like going, okay, so we're gonna just leave Bruce there? you're not gonna
No, I think at the end of season 3 he ends up coming back. And I believe he talks to Todd.
I think so.
At the end of 3.
It's been a while since I watched the season 3.
Speaking of Jason Todd, that's another travesty. Jason Todd has been one of the gems of the entire show. And he was in one episode.
Yes.
In the 4th season. And it was a good episode to bring him in. It made sense to have him do the training, or a lot of the training, for Tim Drake. That worked. I liked it quite a bit. And I understand possibly why they didn't bring him on. If you go back to the trades prior to season 4, prior to James Gunn's announcement that he's canceling everything, they were in the works of doing a spin-off Jason Todd series. So they were probably pulling him from this series because they were getting him ready for his own spin-off series.
Yeah.
And now, because we're never going to see that, what ends up happening is we don't get to see a real conclusion to Jason Todd's story.
Yeah.
And that really sucks. That's just as bad as if we didn't get to see an ending to Dick Grayson's story. Jason Todd was a pivotal player in this series.
Mm-hmm.
And to have him in one episode,
it doesn't make any sense.
No.
Because like if you were, I want to be perfectly clear. If you were actually looking at this as the showrunner and saying, okay, I have this fear that they're going to cancel my show at the end. I have all these elements that was planning on doing to introduce for the next following seasons, I would have actually cut a lot of that out then.
Yeah.
Don't do it.
Yep.
Don't do the Doom Patrol stuff.
Nope.
Don't do the Jason Todd stuff. Focus on your narrative. Focus on your narrative, where your whole focus in the first couple episodes, as I said earlier in the show, Connor, Lex Luthor, Sanger, Brother Blood.
Mm-hmm.
Focus on that. Just give us that story. Because if you think about it, Mike, the two bright spots of this season we're talking about have nothing to do with the story, because like the Jason
You're
Todd
right.
stuff
Yeah.
doesn't affect anything of the Brother Blood narrative.
Nope.
Doom Patrol didn't affect the Brother Blood narrative at all. The only thing it affected was like, okay, Gar can control his powers more, and he's controlled to the red. Okay, well, Gar helped out more in the end of the scheme of things, but we could have gotten there without actually wasting our time.
Yeah.
So and instead of those two episodes, or even that one moment that are good, you could have stuck to your narrative and given us a stronger narrative by giving us more details needed. Give us more ideas of like why Connor decides to team up with Sanger, and for some strange reason create a video game from LexCorp. Okay. Okay.
That's so hip, David.
It's so
all
hip.
the kids will love it. They all
Look,
use apps.
We're new, so I'm bringing in this guy to be a game designer. Okay.
Well, David, that leads into tons of other problems I had with this series or this season, some of which you can pinpoint the beginnings of those problems or the catalyst of those problems in earlier seasons. For example, the way they handled Connor Kent. Now, I want to be very careful how I say this, because I really enjoyed Connor Kent's character throughout the entire run.
Yep.
But can we please speak of the massive issue of calling him Connor Kent, and then the whole world knows he's also Superboy?
Boy.
Will they not put it 2 and 2 together?
Mm-hmm.
Superboy, Connor Kent, Superman. Is he Clark Kent? Like, you're literally telling the world who Superman is.
Plus,
It takes a little bit of deductive skills to figure that out. And second, in the first 3 seasons, Connor Kent was effectively conveyed as being extremely naive
yes.
because he had no world experience. He was intelligent, but you can take Einstein, the man who played Einstein, or the man who would become the Einstein we would learn about in history. If you never gave him a book and taught him anything, all that intelligence would mean nothing, because he doesn't have anything in his head.
Yes.
Connor Kent doesn't know things. He may be super intelligent because he's genetically connected to Lex Luthor, but he doesn't have genetic memory. And yet, for some reason, he suddenly knows how to run a business. He knows the ins and outs of computer systems, firewall, antivirus. When did you learn any of these things? I'm like, okay, so you read a book in a half a second. Can we see that?
Exactly.
And they didn't say that, by the way, but that would have been a very half-assed attempt, at least, at making it believable that someone who has no world experience, who's essentially a 9-year-old, suddenly can run a business and become the new Lex Luthor.
Or even, here's the thing. Also, the fact that he took the name Kent, and I'm like going, we never really truly saw a scene between him and Superman that this is the reason why he takes the name Kent. Though the reason why Connor's allowed to take the name Kent is because Clark allows it.
And also, are there like genetic cloning laws that allow genetic clones to take all ownership?
All ownership,
Basically,
yeah.
essentially becoming the heir of an estate? Because how
How the hell?
Lex Luthor dies,
Yes.
and Connor
Spoiler
Kent
alert.
inherits everything.
Yes.
Everything. He's not his son. He's half a clone of the man.
Yes.
They
And
didn't even explain. Now, did they say that Lex Luthor signed over everything to him?
No. It was just given to him by Mercy. If you think about it, Mercy Graves shows up.
Like
and
he has some claim
yeah,
because he's genetically connected in some way?
apparently.
Well, if
because
that's
they
the
never-
case, then, I'm going to clone a never mind. Just
You're gonna clone a Mike.
I'm about to
clone?
get facetious, and I'm not going to go
You're
there.
not gonna go there because you don't want to get too angry.
I don't want to be too negative.
But it is a true. That's one of the true gripes of why, instead of actually giving us the Doom Patrol episodes or even the Jason Todd scene, you could have added more scenes with Connor to explain the main story.
They should have slowed things down a bit.
Slow things down
Yeah.
and basically show, oh, hey Connor, actually give us the Superman scene that we all wanted. And that was the amazing part too.
Because outside of, even though the Gar episode was probably my favorite episode because it was written the best, the most interesting portions of the season had to do with Connor, but
Yeah.
it just didn't really go anywhere.
It didn't go
Fell
anywhere.
flat.
It meandered.
He wanted to show everyone that he could do things on his own because he was embarrassed. I'm assuming that he failed to the switch. So he was then going to leave the Titans, become antagonistical towards them, but still fight evil while embracing the evilness of Lex Luthor. And then realizing that's not going to work. So he then tries to join the Titans again. Dude, it's a fractured narrative.
You're explaining. You are saying the exact timeline of Connor's story, and if you just took it and just enhanced it a little bit,
Yeah.
throw in another character in there, maybe throw in a Superman to show up. You did it for the Robins. You might as well have done it for Connor for Superman.
I think Lex Luthor should have had a bigger role.
Bigger role, not kill him off in the first episode.
And I also think Superman should have been more relevant in the series, just like
Yeah.
Bruce Wayne was relevant when it mattered to Grayson.
Like, I agree with you that earlier you said like the ending of Titans was great. We got to see all the Titans kind of
How they wrapped up the characters.
right?
In a very half-assed way, but I don't like how we got there with their closure. But when you look at their closure, I'm okay with it.
The Connor one is what irritates me about that entire
Yes.
thing, because instead of actually, I don't know, just have Superman show up, get someone to play Superman, I don't think the fan base would lose their collective minds
No.
if you decide to cast someone as Superman. But the fact that even in the end, we don't really see Superman. It's alluded because Connor's flying around and basically talking to Superman,
Yeah.
but you never see him.
Yeah.
And it's like,
I'm kind of over that.
give me a break.
Yeah, quit fucking, tickling our balls.
Yeah,
You guys have
stop
been tickling
blue-balling
our
us.
Superman. You've been tickling our balls with Superman, with allusions to Superman now in so many things.
You mean to tell me that basically the critical acclaim and positivity you got from casting someone to play Bruce Wayne did not sink into your heads that maybe getting an actor to truly portray a character like Superman so that we can enhance one of our characters in their narrative?
Yeah. You are right, Dave, about that.
And-
like they succeeded where a lot of people doubted them in casting an older Bruce Wayne.
An older Bruce Wayne.
In fact, I know during the first season discussions, you, me, Steve, as well as Bob, and I think Paul, very seldom do all five of us, how many? 5 of us agree. We all said, wow, Ian Glenn, who played Bruce Wayne, his portrayal blew us away.
Yeah.
It was not what we expected. I think it was the second season is where he made his appearance. He won us over with a very mature, refined version of Bruce Wayne.
Bruce Wayne.
They could have done the exact same thing with Clark Kent or
Kent.
Superman.
Can you imagine like if they just stopped blue balling us and
Yeah.
showed us a older version of Clark Kent? Like let's say it was a character like Superman from Kingdom Come.
Mm-hmm.
My God, can you actually see how cool that would be to see like Kingdom Come Superman teaching and coming to terms with Connor?
You know what should have happened, Dave? Because you and I are on the exact same track here. Lex Luthor should have been the first half. Something happens similar to what happened in the first episode. He dies. He lets Connor down in some way, disappoints him, and you find Connor falling into the existential despair of villainy. Let's say he feels like he's more good than bad. Then suddenly Superman comes in for the second half and shows Connor what he can actually be.
Yeah. Or even, here's the best part. Connor doesn't even know who Superman. It's never alluded that he knows who Superman is.
No, he doesn't, even though his name is Kent, which
even
is
though it's
fucking
Kent,
stupid.
And it's stupid. But like, could you imagine? This is what I was like thinking, and I wrote this down in my notes. Like, alternatives to make this season better. Midway through the season, because me and you were on the same wavelength. Connor goes through an existential crisis. Superman doesn't show up. Clark Kent does. Clark Kent approaches Connor and confronts him. Connor basically lashes out at Clark Kent. All of a sudden, Clark Kent stops him. And then it dawns on Connor, who the hell is this? And then he realizes Clark Kent's Superman.
Yeah.
How emotionally of an impactful scene that could be of like Clark Kent coming in, not as Superman. He's not going to show up to this clone that he doesn't know that's wearing his symbol. He's not going to do that. He's going to show up as Clark.
That's Superman appropriation, bro.
Yeah. But like he'll show up as Clark, and guess what? At the end, that's how Connor gets the Kent surname.
Dude,
he earns the Kent surname.
How awesome would have been? Because we know that even though Lex Luthor views Superman as a threat, he also respects him for the most part in a lot of the stories. Imagine if Lex Luthor was the one that said you have an S on your chest, but you haven't earned it. You know, like something like that, just to show that he hasn't become the person he is. Even though he doesn't agree with Superman's ideology, it's always been clear that he respects the man in some way.
Oh, yeah.
So imagine if he's the one to say something like that to Connor. That Lex Luthor, the enemy of Superman, says, you wear an S on your chest, but you haven't earned it.
Yeah.
Imagine if that's how you started the season up. And that was what ended up, you had then this identity crisis, which is what essentially he was dealing with, was an identity crisis. That would have been the moment that would have set that definitive path towards reconciling his identity crisis. But of course, that would require thought, David, and good writers. And that brings me to my next point, and then we're going to close out our discussion. The change in creative hands from season 1 to season 4 is, I would say, if we had to pinpoint one problem, let's not just blame Warner Brothers. It is the changing in creative hands. Now, even though the same executive producers were on board, when you look at the season 1 writers, you have Akiva Goldsman, Jeff Johns, Richard Hatem, Greg Berlanti, Marisha Mukherjee, Greg Walker, Brian Edward Hill, Jeffrey David Thomas. Season 4, you have Jeff Johns, Richard Hatem, and the rest of the writers, which are 8, are all new. They were only in season 4, or only staffed in season 4. So you have an entirely different writing room. And Jeff Johns, I believe his script that was for this episode was actually something he had written in a prior season. So technically we have one returning writer, Richard Hatem, who is also a CW writer. He isn't the strongest of writers.
Yeah, I'm looking at the writing separation for each of the writers of the episode. Guess what? Jeff Johns, he's the one that he's actually credited for is Dude, Where's My Gar, which is the 9th episode.
Yeah.
And even then, it's a teleplay by Jeff Johns.
Yes.
So
yes,
for when it comes to the writing room, it's a completely different writing room.
And this could be the fact that many of the writers from season 1 and 2 saw the writing on the wall and they started looking for other work and didn't come back for the fourth season. That does happen a lot in television when there's a change in leadership or a change in studio or CEOs, because they know that shows are going to start being canceled, because that's typically what these new studio heads do when they come on board. They start closing out or shelving projects that are in the works, and they start greenlighting their own things. All right, David. So overall, I would probably give this season a 62%. It isn't good. The directing isn't good. The visual effects is awful.
It's awful this year.
How do you go from really good effects,
Good choreography,
a good stunt
And-
choreography, all of it, David, just was missing in this
Yeah.
final season. The entire season felt like a different show. If it wasn't for those characters that we have grown to have rapport with, there's no way anyone would be able to say, yeah, this is written and directed and produced by the same people. These are the same characters. There's no way.
Yeah, there's no way, because and if you look at I look back at like my scores of like the prior season and this season, it's night and day, because you gave it a
61.
61. I'm at a 60 with this, and last season I was giving 80s and 90s on
Yeah.
this. And to go from that to have such a drastic drop off, that's why I was like saying I could have come in here today and say, oh, this is all WB's fault. No. I started thinking to myself, it's too much of a great drop off and quality to blame solely WB. This falls on the showrunners and the writers.
Listen, there's
And-
plenty of blame to go around.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not going to disagree with you. When it comes down to it, it is the showrunner's responsibility.
I don't want us to be lumped into the echo chamber of the fans that just want to scream, it's all WB's fault. Oh my God, no.
It
No.
is a lot.
A
They
lot of
have a
it.
lot of blame.
A lot of blame is on them.
Yeah.
But this in particular, no. This falls on the showrunners and
When you
and the
drop
writers.
nearly 30% based on your average score,
Yeah.
I mean that's obviously the writing room.
That's the writing room. And it's so
you know what?
disappointing. to
Maybe
me.
not just writers, David. Maybe it's like we keep saying the writers, and yes, the writers definitely they have a fair share of blame to hold as well. But just because you look at the overall dip in quality, like we just mentioned a few moments ago, that's producing as well.
Yeah, and that leads me to my biggest one too. My biggest point is like my biggest disappointment is Akiva Goldsman
Leadership, then.
leadership.
Yep.
Because Akiva Goldsman, if people listen to other shows in our network, know I have glowingly talked about how Akiva Goldsman has been doing fantastic work in Star Trek, and then I get to Titans. And originally, a long time ago, I remember talking with a friend of mine saying, oh, I'm so excited about this Titans because Akiva Goldsman's tied to this. And I know he's done a great job even in the past seasons of Titans. You come up and you drop a turd on my desk like this?
A steamy hot turd
And it's
just
like-
for all of us.
Dude, I have so high hopes for Akiva Goldsman, and he drops a turd on me. And it's like, okay, I'm only going to say that I hope that you don't do this again, but
At least he didn't put it in our mouth. I mean,
yeah, exactly. He didn't give me a Cleveland steam.
Oh. All right. You know what? We need to close out today's discussion. I'm hoping we didn't piss off any of our listeners. I always feel bad when they enjoyed something and then here we come along and we leave our own version of a hot, steamy pile of shit on their desk. So I do apologize if you love the season, but I struggled. I almost quit watching several times, and out of sheer stubbornness and anger, I decided to plow through it.
You're hate watching it. You're just anger
That's
watching
pretty
it.
much what happened. About episode 5, episode 6, I was like, you know what? Fuck this show. All right. Thank you, everybody, for listening. Thank you, David.
Thank you.